What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kilo Loco, and today we're going to be going over core data, showing you how to create objects and also read objects. Now, you might be saying, Kilo, I'm a loyal subscriber, man, and I've already seen your core data video. Well, guess what? I made a couple of mistakes in the past. I just want to, go back, redo this now, being a better developer today. And also, I want to show you how to do it with best practices, using something like dependency injection. So let's go ahead and get into it. So we're actually going to start off with a brand new Xcode project. So I'm gonna just do Xcode project over here, brand new Xcode project on my other screen, and then I'll drag it over here on this screen. Alrighty then. Alright, so single view app, and we're gonna just press enter right here, and we're gonna just say, core, learning core data. Learning core data, because this is where everything's going to start, and we're actually going to be using this project for a while. Now we're going to be checking the use core data just so that we get those special little methods up in our app delegate. Oh, and PS for all you haters out there, if you don't like the teaching style, you can get out. You can GTFO right now. I don't want to hear it. Oh, why you act like this? Boo, 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 boo. Just get out of here, dude. All right, so what we got is if we created our app with core data, with that little check mark checked, what we're going to see is we're going to have an XC data model ID file right here, which is going to be this, and then we're also going to have our app delegate right here, which is going to give us the save context and the persistent container. Now, what I'm actually going to do is, I asked you guys online to see what you guys wanted to do in Twitter, and you guys were like, oh, give us stuff in, programmatically. So that's what we're doing. Deleting the main interface because we're not going to be using storyboards no more. So let's go ahead and delete that storyboard because y'all don't like them. All right. What we have to do is, first of all, I'm going to get rid of all the trash up in here, which are everything that's outside of the core data stack, and with the exception of the did finish launching with options. And what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and make sure that we have our view controller being initialized. So we'll say let VC is equal to our view controller. We'll initialize that bad boy. We also need to give our window a new window, because that's not being handled by storyboards. So we'll create a rect, and we're gonna do it, no. We're gonna do a window from the UI screen. I don't know what I was doing right there, dot main screen dot bounds. So like so, and then what we would do is we would access our window, set the root view controller over here, and then we just do window dot make key and visible. So now, if we go back to our view controller file, we're going to delete that trash that did receive memory warning. We ain't messing with that right now. And we're just going to print this out. We're going to say, oh, hi. And we just want to make sure that everything's working up and running. So let's check this. And as we can see, we did get our oh, hi, so we know that it is working properly. Alright, so we're actually not going to attach any UI to this. We may do it in the future as a separate tutorial, but let's just jump right into how to create an object in core data. So what we need to do is we need to go to our XC data model ID file right here, whatever your folder name is, and we need to add an entity, which we can do right here, and it's going to give you an entity right here. Call that entity whatever the hell you want. Call it Pokemon, call it, Cheeto Puffs, whatever. I'm going to call mine user. Keep it real simple today. Attributes is just like any of the properties that you would have on your object, so any of the variables or the constants that you would have on your object, that's what the attributes are. So the user has a name, keeping it very simple, very straightforward. The type, it's going to be a string. Come on, dude, you already knew that. And then what we're going to do with this attribute, select it, the name, select it, we're just going to make sure that we're going to uncheck this optional. Now, every time I do this, Xcode just ignores me anyway, and it sets it as optional. But, I want to do my job. Xcode, can get fired for not doing its job. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to make sure that our user entity is selected. We need to go over here to the right side, make sure that your data model inspector is selected, this little trash can looking buddy guy. And then what we need to do is we need to change the module to our current product module. And then the code gen, we want to make sure that it's manual/none. These other two kind of save the information to save it to somewhere on your computer, and it just causes weird stuff to happen. So this is why we're always going to do manual/none. It's just the easiest way. Believe that. Once we've done that, we're going to make sure, once again, our user is selected. We go up to Editor. We go to Create NSManageObject subclass, because NSManageObject is what Core Data uses in order to make sure that it's like essentially able to save. We're going to create this guy, make sure that our project is selected, and we're going to make sure that the entity that we want to create files or create classes for is selected, which our user entity is the one that we want to create files and classes for, or a class for, and we're going to say next. Now, what we need to do is we want to make sure that this is saved in the correct location. We don't want to save it up here where the blue Xcode project file is located at. We actually want to save it in our folder right here with the rest of these files. So let's go ahead and change that. Not really sure why Core Data thinks we want to save it up there. It makes our project look kind of funky, and I don't like funky. Alright, so now if you take a look at the files that are created, it creates your user class. If you're following along with me, it creates whatever the entity class, right, as a subclass of NSManageObject. And then you can see your properties right here, which we only have name, and like I said, even though we said we don't want it to be optional, it made us optional, so I'm just going to delete that. So anyway. And then it also gives us this method in here that allows us to do a fetch request on this object. So pretty cool. Alright, now that we have our user object pretty much set up, what we're going to do is we also want to separate our core data or our persistent code from our app delegate. So let's go to our app delegate and take a look. Now, where the mark was at the core data stack, we can see that it's providing us with a persistent container, and this is pretty much where you know, all of the information is kind of being stored from core data. And then it also gives us this method that allows us to save the changes or save the context, which is tracking those changes and pretty much saves to core data. That's the basic gist of it. Anyway, what we want to do is we're going to just pull all this stuff. We're going to just yank it on out. Just bam, it's mine now. And what we're going to do is we're going to just go ahead and go to this folder. We're going to create a new file. It's going to be a Swift file. We're not subclassing anything right now. And I'll just call this my persistence manager. Alrighty. So what we will do now is we need to also import core data, or else none of these objects will actually exist because we need access to those objects. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a persistence manager, which is pretty much going to be the object that's going to manage anything that has to do with persistence. So what I'll do is I'll create a final, and this is actually going to, a final class, and I'll call this persistence manager. And I'm creating a final class quite simply because I don't want you to be able to subclass it. It's mine, don't change it. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to turn this bad boy into a singleton. And you're like, oh no, not a singleton. Yes, a singleton. Oh yeah. So let's go ahead and do our private init like so. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a static let shared equals a persistence manager like this, and that's going to be our singleton right there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and plop those two you know, attributes in here. So we have the persistence container in here. Let's just take out all these comments. Read them if you want to really know what's going on, but your boy don't care. So we're just gonna erase all that nonsense, right? We don't need any of that. We don't need no stinking comments. All right. And the only other thing that I want to do is, one, I don't want it to say save context. I don't want it to have this weird space in between the arguments call or whatever it's called, the parentheses. And then also I want to print, you know, when I was able to save, I'll say save successfully. Save successfully, maybe with a D. Yeah, that's better English. There you go. So we want to just be able to call our persistence manager and just say .save. We don't really need to say save context. Save is good enough for me. The other thing that I also want to do is, just in case we do need to reference the context, which is provided through the persistence container right here, and it's under view context, we're actually going to make a lazy var, and this is going to be called just context. And this will be equal to our persistence, persistent container, like that, dot view context, like that. And we need it to be lazy or else we won't be able to access it like so. Anyway, and we also don't want these things to exist if we haven't called them yet. So that's good too, right? So now we actually have our persistence manager set up, and what we are going to do is we're actually going to pass our persistence manager into our view controller so that we can actually use it. Now, in the past, I would do something like this: persistence manager dot shared dot like save or whatever the heck I was going to do, right? And y'all go crazy. Y'all go crazy. Y'all don't like that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use dependency injection. We're going to say init, and we're going to initialize this with a persistence manager of type, guess what? You guessed it, persistence manager. And then we also want to have a constant called persistence manager of type what? Of type what? Persistence manager. And we'll just say self.persistence manager. Whoa, managed buffer. Nope. Persistence manager. Like so. Now, on an initializer for a view controller, you actually have to make sure that you do the super.init, and you want this one down here. And we'll say nil, and bundle will be nil. And then we need the required init. That's going to blow up if you try to implement this with a storyboard. It's going to be like, hey, don't do that, dude. I don't like you. So we don't want to do that. So now we'll be able to access our persistent manager and say, get the context, persistent container, save, do whatever the heck we were going to do in the first place. All right, so we're still getting set up. We still haven't done anything really in core data, but we're getting there. We're getting there. Now what we need to do is we need to go back to our app delegate, create this view controller properly with a persistence manager, like so. And this is where we're actually going to use our persistence manager singleton. See? Singletons aren't always bad. I'm just making sure that I'm only ever referencing the same object, but I'm doing it through dependency injection, so no crybabies. Awesome. Okay, so now we're creating our project properly, and all I want to do is I just want to see if I can save. So let's go ahead and try to save, and if we were able to successfully save, we should be able to see saved successfully, right? Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to just go back over to our view controller.swift, and we're going to just go ahead and create a function that's going to be to create a user. So we're going to say func create user, and you do whatever you want to do in order to create a user, implement it however you need to. No UI on this one, guys. It's all code. We jumping into just pure code up in here. So what we want to do is we want to create a user, so let user, if I know how to spell, is equal, hey, that's not equal, is equal to user. And how do we initialize this? We pass in a context, and guess what? Persistence manager got that for us. So we're going to say persistence manager dot context. Ooh, I like that. From there, what we need to say is user dot name is going to be equal to whatever we're going to do, right? Kyle, I like that. And then we say persistence manager dot save, and we need to run that function. So we have a create user function. We can just delete this, and we're going to just say, guess what? Create user. All right, saved successfully. So as you can see, whenever you're going to create an object right here from core data, you can't initialize it like normal, where you maybe do this, right? or you do this, right? This stuff, it's no bueno, it doesn't work right. Okay, so this doesn't work. So what you actually have to do is you have to initialize it with the context, and we're just passing in the context which were provided through our persistence manager right here, that context right there. So that is allowing us to create a user object from core data, and then once we create that user object and we're also creating it inside of that context, then we're also making changes on the properties of that context, the .name, which is a string, we set it to Kyle, and then we're saying save. Now if we go ahead and take a look at the save that was provided to us, what it's doing is it's simply accessing the context, which it doesn't need to do that no more because now we have this instance variable of context, so that's fine. So context, if it has changes, which it now does because we created a user inside of that context, that's why you have to create it with a context in the first place. And then we're just since we do have changes, it's going to do context.save, and then since it was successful, it says saved successfully. So that is how you create an object in core data. You know, create core data object, like so. Alright, so now that we have that, all we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we can actually get the users back that we've saved. So let's go ahead and create a function called getUsers. You know, very simple, very straightforward. So what we're going to say is let users equals persistence manager dot context, and then we're going to say fetch. Now we have to pass in a fetch request, but if you go ahead and remember what we had in our core data properties, we have this fetch request method that's provided in our extension, which allows us to receive a NS fetch request that's going to be returning a user. So we can actually pass that right on in there. So we can say user dot fetch request, since it is, if you take a look, it is a class. It's a class method. So it's a class method, which is pretty cool. Gives us access to it. So now we have users, but if you take a look at this and we option click it, we notice that users is actually an optional any. So we're going to go ahead and unwrap this bad boy, and we're going to say guard let users as an array of, guess what? You guessed it, user. And if we can't get that, then we're just going to return. Now we're going to have an array of users, and what we're going to do, because these are NS managed objects and they don't print very nicely, what we'll do is we'll say users dot for each, and what we can do is we can pass in this closure right here, and we'll just say print the object in question, which we'll name it just $0, and the name for that user. So this is just an easy way to print each of the objects in that array. Now let's take a look at this. Call can throw but is not marked with try. We're just going to force try this because I like to live life on the edge. Now I know I said that we're going to be doing some best practices, and we are, but we're actually not going to be using this for very long. And then the last thing that we need to do is we just need to make sure that we're going to get those users, shall we? So let's go ahead and run this bad boy real quickly. And since we're living life on the edge, we get it nice and printed out. We got Kyle. So let's go ahead and create another user, shall we? Create another user. This one's going to be Adriana. And since we're creating a user and then getting all the users, let's take a look at what's going to happen. All right, Kyle and Adriana, and if we do this one more time, let's just make sure that it's working. So we should be getting Kyle, Adriana, Andrew, and we are getting each of our objects printed out. So this is essentially how you can do a read. You know, you have to access the persistence manager, and then overall you need to access the NS managed context and do a fetch request. Now, whenever you create an entity that is, and it creates this properties whenever it creates the properties for you from that entity, it should give you a fetch request. If not, you can build it yourself. But yeah, this pretty much gives you the fetch request that you need in order to pass it into this fetch method. And then all we have to do is we need to just, force try it, or, do it the right way. Do it the right way, guys. And then, just cast it as whatever we're supposed to be getting back. So yeah. Now, this is all fine and dandy, but it's not very reusable, so I actually don't want to do this. I actually want to create a method inside of our persistence manager that's going to allow us to fetch an object directly and just always returns an array. I don't want to do no stinking tries. So real quick, what we're going to do is we're just going to say a function that's going to be called fetch, and this is actually going to be a generic function. So what we need to do is we need to make it generic by saying, okay, well, we're going to have a type, so that's going to be T, a type of NS managed object. So only an NS managed object is going to work with this function. And then what we're going to do is, whoa, how did that happen? What we're going to do is the argument is actually going to be the object type. We need to pass in the object type, which is going to be like user.self or people.self or customer.self, whatever. Any object.self, as long as it's an NS managed object. So, and that's going to be of type T, right? T.type, like so. And then what this function is made to do is it's actually made to return whatever object type that we're actually passing in here. So we need an array of whatever the object type is that we're passing in here so that we can have nice, super sexy, clean code. Oh, yeah. Okay, guys. So what we need to do is we need to pretty much do what's happening in here. We need to access a context. We need to fetch it out of that context. And what we also want to do is we want to cast it as whatever the object is and return it as an array so that we can just say let users is equal to, something nice and pretty and get those users, right? So first of all, in order to do just a regular fetch request, we would do it like this. So we would say let fetch request, if we were going to make one ourselves, and it's going to be equal to ns fetch request, like so, and then we have to pass in a ns fetch request result, and then we have to also say entity name, like so. So we need to pass in an entity name. Now you might be like, well, user, right? But then this wouldn't be very dynamic. We would only be able to get users out of that. That ain't no bueno. That's no bueno. Come on. So what we need to do is we need to create an entity name, like so, and this is going to be a string, and we're going to create a string by describing the object type. Because what that's going to do is it's going to pretty much say, like, whatever you pass in here is going to just make a string out of whatever that object's name is. So if we pass in a user object, it's going to create user. If we pass in like a pet object, it's going to create a pet. And it's going to be a string that says pet in that exact spelling. So we can just go ahead and pass that into our entity name, and that should work. All right. Next, what we have to do is remember, over here in our view controller, we had to mark it with try because the fetch request, the fetch method actually throws, right? It throws. So we need to handle that in our code. Now, if it fails or if anything goes wrong, all we're going to do is we'll still print out the error. Sure, why not? I don't care. It's still going to print out the error, but since this is going to always return a guaranteed array of whatever object is supposed to be, whatever object type is passed in here, we're just gonna return an empty array so that everything keeps working. Because why not? Because why not? Well, one reason why not is because it may not be very descriptive. You might want to do some better error handling than your boy, but that's fine too. Whatever. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say let fetched objects equals, and we're going to access our context up here, right? Just like we did before, we have to say context dot fetch, and then we're going to pass in our fetch request, which we created up here. Fetch request. And what we also need to do is mark this with try. Now, if we were to do it like this, what we would get is, once again, an array of any. So instead of doing it like that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to cast it as an array of whatever object type that we passed in here, right? Let's see, error throws are not handled. Oh, not else. Come on, guys, you saw that. It's catch. Silly kilo. Come on now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to return those fetched objects. But keep in mind, we're casting it as, you know, optional. It's optional cast as this object, because as an array of that object, because we don't know if it's going to work or not. So we'll just say, you know, question mark, question mark. If that doesn't work, then just return, once again, an empty array of whatever object that we were requesting in the first place. So that seems pretty cool. So let's go ahead and try that on out. Let's see if it still works. So now, instead of all this hoopla, what we can do is we can just say let users equals persistence manager dot fetch, and we're gonna fetch user dot self, because that is actually an NS managed object, like so. And what we can do is we can go ahead and run this one last time and make sure that our output stays the same. And would you look at that, we're still, once again, you know, we're still creating a user. We didn't update the name. We have 2 Andrews in there, but we are getting that output, so we are calling it correctly. So that is all, guys. That's all we're going to do for today. Don't worry, I know that your guys' biggest concern is, okay, well, we know how to create, we know how to read, but how do we update, how do we delete? Update will be held in its own separate video. Same thing with delete, guys. So don't worry, those 2 videos are going to be coming up. We're going to be going through core data a lot more thoroughly. We're going to be covering, you know, migrations and you know, relationships and all kinds of crazy stuff. All the stuff that you guys want to see with core data. So don't worry, your boy's going to cover it here. Oh yeah. Alright, so if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. But if you really liked it, if you really want to help out the channel, make sure you share the video with as many devs as possible, because that will really help the channel grow. It will help me make sure that I know that, hey, you guys like this stuff, so make sure you keep putting out videos for them, because they like it, right? They like it. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed the video. Make sure you're subscribed and keep on coding passionately. Later.